We're going to start with the U.S. press. We're going to take 2 from the U.S. We're going to take 2 from international.
And before we're talking about what we've done at the ministerial, I want to reaffirm a few things from this podium. First, as we see it, NATO's strategic objectives are to prevent great power conflict in Europe, deter nuclear and non-nuclear aggression, and defeat threats to treaty allies should deterrence fail. Second, the U.S. is committed to building a stronger, more lethal NATO. However, we must ensure that European and Canadian commitment to Article 3 of this treaty is just as strong. And that begins with increasing defense spending. 2% is a start, as President Trump has said, but it's not enough. Nor is 3%, nor is 4%, more like 5%. Real investment, real urgency. We can talk all we want about values. Values are important. But you can't shoot values. You can't shoot flags, and you can't shoot strong speeches. There is no replacement for hard power. As much as we may not want to like the world we live in some cases, there's nothing like hard power. NATO is a great alliance, the most successful defense alliance in history. But to endure for the future, our partners must do far more for Europe's defense. We must make NATO great again. It begins with defense spending. First General and then President Eisenhower was one of NATO's strongest supporters. He believed in a strong relationship with Europe. However, by the end of Eisenhower's presidency, even he was concerned that Europe was not shouldering enough of its own defense, nearly making, in Eisenhower's words, quote, a sucker out of Uncle Sam. Well, like President Eisenhower, this administration believes in alliances, deeply believes in alliances. But make no mistake, President Trump will not allow anyone to turn Uncle Sam into Uncle Sucker. Any suggestion that President Trump is doing anything other than negotiating from a position of strength is on its face ahistorical and false. So when you look at what he may have to give or take, what's in or what's out in those negotiations, we have the perfect deal maker at the table from a position of strength to deal with both Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. No one's going to get everything that they want. Understanding who committed the aggression in the first place. But I challenge anyone else to think of a world leader at this moment who, with credibility and strength, could bring those two leaders to the table and forge a durable peace that ultimately serves the interests of Ukraine, stops the killing and the death, which Trump has been clear he wants to do, and hopefully ultimately is guaranteed by strength of Europeans who are there prepared to back it up. I want to be clear about something as it pertains to NATO membership not being a realistic outcome for negotiations. That's something that was stated as part of my remarks here, as part of a coordination with how we're executing these ongoing negotiations, which are led by President Trump. All of that said, these negotiations are led by President Trump. Everything is on the table in his conversations with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. What he decides to allow or not allow is at the purview of the leader of the free world, of President Trump. So I'm not going to stand at this podium and declare what President Trump will do or won't do, what will be in or what will be out, what concessions will be made or what concessions are not made.
What leverage exactly is Ukraine being left with, especially if the U.S. also plans to wind down its military aid? And then quickly, if a NATO ally is attacked by Russia or any country, will the U.S. unequivocally uphold its obligations under Article 5, regardless of that country's...
Well, we've said we're committed to the alliance, and that's part of the alliance, right? You point out Article 5, you point out Article 3. It's just a cheap, I'm not saying it's cheap coming from you, but it's just a cheap political point to say, oh, we've left all the negotiating cards off the table. by recognizing some realities that exist on the ground. President Zelensky understands the realities on the ground, President Putin understands the realities on the ground, and President Trump, as a deal maker, as a negotiator, understands those dynamics as well. The peace dividend has to end. There are autocrats with ambitions around the globe, from Russia to the Communist Chinese. Either the West awakens to that reality and creates combat multipliers with their allies and partners, to include NATO, or we will abdicate that responsibility to somebody else with all the wrong values.